Anyway, I think by now most of you know these two wonderful talents that are going to present their work and ideas and histories to you. Sarra Idris has a long history with this department, given that she once sat over there, not in this nice room. She helped pay for this room. And Accra has been a longtime member of the SVA community. He teaches upstairs in the BFA, as well as the MFA Fine Arts Department. I'm going to begin with Sarah's bio, and then when it's Accra's time, I'll introduce him similarly. By the way, they have much in common in their interest in community, in their interest in looking at social justice and issues of diversity. So it's great to have them together, and they are new faculty in this department, though not new to us as a community of artists. Sarra Idris is Sudanese American director, editor, and visual artist, based obviously in New York. She is also the founder and partner of Golden Trust Labs, a creative development company devoted to telling great stories from unexplored perspectives, looking out, looking at the other, looking new, looking fresh. As an editor, Sarra has over 15 years of experience in various projects across TV, commercials, web series, short films, music videos, companies, including NBC, Saturday Night Live, Google Creative Lab, Twitter, Pentagram, BBC America. My goodness gracious, where's my 10%? She's done almost everything in the moving image area. As a director, her short films have been screened at Diversity in Cannes Short Film Showcase, New York African Film Festival, Cinetopia Film Festival at the Smithsonian Arab American Museum, and the ICA in London, all very prestigious places. Outside of her professional venue, Sarra is committed to promoting cross-cultural understanding of underrepresented voices. She worked and taught in the Sudan in both Kasti and Khartoum as part of the Cultural Healing Project and as an artist residence in Rashid Diab, am I saying that right? Art Center in Khartoum. Khartoum is a place I would like to go, haven't been. I will get there one day. Cheers.
Hello. Oh, I guess I'll take this off. I wore lipstick. I have no idea if it's going to be all over my face. I'm not sure if we're going to take this off or not. Okay. How are you guys doing? So I was figuring out how to go about talking to you guys today in terms of my work. So, but I figured the best way to do it is to do what I tell my students, which is tell me who you are and your creative journey and how you landed where you are today. Just because I think it's helpful, it was actually helpful for me to kind of go back and look at stuff even from college, but also it just might give you a bit more insight as to what I do and why I do it. I think we're all driven by something. I think we're all kind of chasing a magic that we don't always find, but we keep striving. And in some ways, it's kind of craziness, right? To kind of keep doing something over and over again. But we, you know, it's something I think we all, a journey that we all have in common. So my first memory, and I only have two very vivid childhood memories from when I was really young, is standing next to my father, who was a very tall man in stature, but also in character, near the River Nile, and holding his hand as we looked at fireworks. And that's the picture of my father. That's in Egypt. He traveled a lot when I was younger. And I love this image. And a lot of times he was a much older dad. My father was born in 1924. the age of most people's grandfathers. He passed away, Allah yarhamu, not too long ago. But he always took photographs, and I didn't know that he also loved photography till much later. So my head was always filled with images of him from way before I was born in different places. And this one was always one of them that I adored. And it was him with, heads of state and just visiting different countries. And so it was interesting that my second earliest memory is going with my family to go see King Kong in Khartoum. And Charlie, actually, my brother told me today, might not have been the original, it might have been the 1976 one that came out again later because it takes some time. But it was interesting looking at King Kong because I was looking at it thinking, where is this place? Where is Skull Island? Where is this crazy, fictional place? And I never knew that people on this side of the planet would be thinking that I lived where Kong did, that Africa was this place that everyone used for their imagination, that they made, fictional and real. For some people, it was their homeland, and others, it was a place where if nothing could be explained, it lived in Africa. So the idea of place became really important to me. And when we eventually had to come to the States, that's me with the attitude in the front. I didn't know I would come to the place that Kong came, I came to New York City. And if you told me when I was watching King Kong that I eventually would also go to New York City, I would have told you were lying. I had no idea. It was just due to circumstance and culture and politics. And so when we came, I was a Muslim, young, African, Black girl, didn't know English. And I learned English from Catholic nuns in Catholic school and phonics books and TV. But I was at an age where I was told that up until the age of 8, you can learn multiple languages without having an accent. In some ways, it was a savior, but others, it was tough because for some of the other kids, they didn't understand why I wasn't speaking as fluently, why I didn't understand certain, references to America and slavery in the South, or just things like chitlins or certain, jokes or et cetera. And it took me a while to really understand, but it also made me realize that I was living something that was a dichotomy. I had to keep navigating culturally from place to place. And given that the history of Blackness in America, but also African Americans in America, I gravitated towards it, not just because I looked like them, but because I understood, and I started to kind of read, I understood what W. Du Bois was talking about when he talked about a double consciousness. I understood what Baldwin was talking about in the anger and why he wrote The Fire Next Time. I understood what Bell Hooks was speaking of. And I started to kind of gravitate towards that literature because it helped me understand, even though it wasn't of me, even though it wasn't directly my experience, it was the only thing I could see that was similar. And eventually I landed upon Toni Morrison, who I think in a few quotes does the best, or offered me the best explanation of what this magic I was chasing or what photography and art can do. And I'll just read this quote out loud. It says, "I was talking about time. It's so hard for me to believe in it. Some things go, pass on. Some things just stay. I used to think it was my rememory, Some things you forget, other things you never do. But it's not but it's not. Places are still there. If a house burns down, it's gone, but the place, the picture of it stays, and not just in my rememory, but out there in the world. What I remember is a picture floating around out there, outside my head. I mean, even if I don't think it, even if I die, the picture of what I did or knew or saw is still out there, right in the place where it happened." And somehow she explained to me everything that I was feeling in her book, Beloved, which is a an amazing book. It's really dark in a lot of ways, but it's about a woman named Setha was a slave, and she was haunted by her experiences. And even though she tried to move on, at one point she thought her slave master came back, and she had 3 kids, and she decided that it was better for them to die than to go into slavery. And so she killed one of her children. She wanted to kill all 3, but she killed one named Beloved. And later on in the novel, Beloved comes back and haunts her. But Beloved represents the beloved. It represents the experiences. And anytime she's near her or anyone else is near her, the memory and the experiences come back. And somehow in this story, I found this idea of how I was always carrying, no matter where I was, whether I was in Sudan or I was in America, this other consciousness, this other experience, and certain things would trigger it and make me remember. And so I completely understood what she means by this place is always there, because it's something that you carry with you. It's something that's always in your mind, even though you're experiencing new things. So I'm going to start with very early work, so forgive it, but to explain. So this is stuff I was doing in college, and the minute I saw or understood photography or the idea of drawing with light, I was in love. I was hooked. And I just really started to think about what it meant to draw with light, capture light, play with light. And I wanted to just keep pushing what that meant. And so photographs, initially just natural light, literally in my room, that then I started pushing and making digital, adding certain filters, sometimes doing it by hand, to just kind of push the boundary of what it meant, to have it a little bit off. And again, play more with the idea of just what it means to play with light and capture it. So these are printed on drawing paper. And then soon after, a teacher said to me, well, do you know there's something called liquid light? And what that is that it's a chemical that if you put it on any surface, it can make it photo sensitive. And so what it does, so that's an example of a picture, and then that's one printed on paper. But it allowed me this freedom to put my hand. I mean, I always drew and stuff, but it allowed me this idea to keep pushing and really play with what it meant to capture light. And so this is how you can kind of, push it. I'm hitting the wrong button. Go. So I started making collages at the time. There's a lot going on in the world, and I was also going back and forth a lot, traveling back and forth between Sudan and the US. And my mom had lost her father, and she always said, because he was kind of like a civil rights leader in Sudan and Khartoum, that he reminded her of Martin Luther King. So I just made some collages as a gift to her, with her and Coretta Scott King and my grandfather, and Martin Luther King. And again, it was printing certain things on liquid light, painting over them, cutting it up, doing different surfaces. The idea of layering, reflection. So all these, I was just kind of pushing the envelope to see where I can go. It's more traditional. And literally writing with light. And then I think I realized at some point that I wanted to, part of what I was collaging was that I wanted to get into the moving image. I didn't realize that, actually until I came to SVA as a graduate student, that part of what I wanted was to add more dimension. I wanted to play with time, sound, light that moved on the image. And so again, this is I went back to Toni Morrison. I picked up Beloved, and this is another quote that led me to do one of my first short films, or I should say video art. It's only like a minute long. She says, "The picture is still there, and what's more, if you go there, You who never was there, if you go there and stand in the place where it was, it will happen again. It will be there for you, waiting for you. So Denver, which is her child in the book, you can never go there, never, because even though it's all over and done with, it's going to always be there waiting for you. So I took this idea, and this is one of the first videos I did where I incorporated some of my photographs and kind of created a place for me to remember in a way.
But I can't remember them. That's the only thing, because you asked me to remember them. I can't remember none. The other one is just my wish you around. Like this. Remember that one? One more. I should have seen the red come 16 so ready to read the rain. Yeah, come darling, how are you? So we just know it's not here. Slime, yeah, so text now, yeah, lots of around there. But never heard it all the way to the end. We do it, but then.
This was an accompanying piece. Whoops, sorry. This was an accompanying piece called Red IMI or Remy, and it was based on the James Baldwin quote, which says, "If I'm not what you say I am, then you are not who you think you are." So again, just playing with identity. Quality-wise, I think I'm going to play this small. Let me see how it goes. And then years later, so those were for my thesis for SVA for the MFA. And fast forward years later, I kind of came back to this format and this idea because Sudan went through a referendum and eventual split between Sudan, and then a new nation was formed, the South Sudan. And I kind of wanted again to kind of explore this idea of double identity.
In July of 2011, a country divided into two new nations, Northern and Southern Sudan. This has been an abusive relationship because oil is thicker than blood. It is the rebirth of two nations. From the waters of the River Nile, from this oil, from this blood, from these hopes and fears, we watch as two new motherlands are born. Welcome to the land of the Blacks.
Then I had to make money. And I had to figure out how to take my skills and translate that into all the things that I wanted to do. And I tried to choose as much as I could projects that resonated. So at this point, I realized that for me, the ideas of transcendence, identity, double consciousness, and also just navigating one's own internal mind, like the internal walls, your own feeling, this kind of intangible place that guides you, the little voice. And so I tried to pick projects that dealt with those things. This is a project it was for a launch for the first organic and natural skincare line. Actually, my sister had started it, my younger sister. So I directed and I edited this for her. Much different feel. It plays better when you can see it all. Let me-
Are you beautiful?
Flesh like how the sun and water distance, the story itself in the next chapter is yours now. So grab the crayon, grab your plan, make it all with child, have to get last. It's all about the bull, you'll shine. When the national fame stayed humble and high, shoulders back, look your brother in his eyes, my best desire shine. Fight your fight, work hard, fight strong, struggle. Next man awesome and you're awesome. Keep climbing, keep trying, keep shining, star another level, keep brave when it is knocking at that door. Come on, 1,000 suns can't hold a candle to your face, so get your shine on. One planet, one nation, proud. I see you, kid.
Shining bright like you saw the light came back in the stars a long time ago. Don't you feel that 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2. When you're a baby, you were meant to take it. Say, the sky is blue, so baby go on and get it. Be love and let it bright. Shining bright like you saw the light came back in the stars a long time ago. Don't you feel that 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2. When you're a baby, you were meant to take it. Say, the sky is blue, so baby go on and get it. Be love and let love ride.
Are you beautiful?
Yeah.
Are you handsome?
dance.
I'm recording. Ready?
Yeah.
Are you beautiful?
Yeah.
Are you handsome?
Yeah.
Are you a king?
Yeah.
Say, I'm a king.
Okay.
I'm a king.
I'm a king.
Say, the sky is mine.
The guy's mine.
The sky is mine.
That guy is mine.
Yes.
The guy is mine.
Say, spread love.
Good love.
Let love ride.
That's right.
Be love.
Be love.
I love you.
I love you.
Mm.
And then let's see. This is a piece I did more recently. It was, sorry, I'm just trying to think if I should show this now, but I think I will. I directed it and edited this. I co-directed and edited this as well. It was for the Brooklyn Jumbies, which is a stilt walkers in Brooklyn. And it was for a magazine. It was Detour magazine that wanted to cover them. Is that the heat? Is that what that sound is? Oh, okay. I was.
Being up on stilts is riveting. It's like a dopamine shot for me.
When we're up there, we transform into a different type of spiritual energy. The origin regions actually are the old Mali Empire, which is West Africa. Still dancer is both physically and metaphysically tall enough to see what was going on in the village or a household, and they would come and assess the situation, either bless the party or guide you through the Middle Passage, the slave trade. We were brought to the Americas and the Caribbean. Some things were lost, some things were retained, and some things were actually changed. We're able to channel our ancestors. It emboldens us and protects us and pushes us. This is a labor of love. That in every darkness, you need that light to just say, it's gonna be all right. We consider ourselves a family, so it is a family thing that we pass down. It's up to us to keep it moving, because if we don't, then it gets lost and forgotten. I will be 90 years old, and if I have to have a long stick as a cane to be on stilts, that's what I'm gonna do.
Do two more. This is also a recent edit. Let me go back. How am I doing on time? I think I should, one more, okay. Trying to think what would be more helpful. There's an interactive video I did, but it's not really meaningful. but it's interesting. And then there's like a Saturday Night Live open, which you might have seen. Actually, let me do this, because maybe for this SNL might be good, because I think in a weird way it culminates some of the things. So for this was our 40th anniversary, and it was interesting because the director, who I knew wanted to do something really special for its 40th, as well as Lauren, Michael, and everyone else. And so they decided to do layering of film, but also these flares and light flares. And given my background, I think I'd known the director, but I hadn't worked with him before. He thought that it would be a good match. And I think for you as students, this is where you can take your own sensibilities and, in terms of work. And I knew that I can handle layering and images and music. And it kind of was one of my favorite things. And I, as a result, got invited back. I've been doing their opening credits for now the past 5 years, but this was one of the first ones we did. So I'll just show that kind of maybe as a culmination from where it started, very personal and artsy, to kind of more on the public format.
It's Saturday Night Live with Vanessa Bayer, Amy Brand, Taryn Killam, Kip McKinnon, Bobby Moynihan, Jenny Farrow, Cecily Strong, Keenan Thompson, featuring Beck Bennett, Michael J, Pete Davidson, Colin Jost, Mooney, Sashir Zameda, musical guest Ariana Grande, and your host Chris Pratt.
I guess I should wrap it up. I guess I don't know. I feel like the journey it's still going. I'm doing a piece right now that is for the Arab American National Museum. That's about immigration, and specifically about those who've migrated from Sudan to the States. So that was a grant that I got with 3 other artists. It's pretty much finished. I just couldn't show anything because of legality. But that one's taken me back as well, more to the format of dealing with the body, but also in trying to mesh these worlds. And that's kind of where I am now, with the idea of doing more narrative work. I've done a short film that I've would share with you at another time, a couple of them, where it's using the same sensibilities and the same voice, but now trying to make it more public. And so meshing the commercial part and the personal part visually to make more, I guess, consumable or accessible images and ideas come to life. So for everyone, I guess the journey just kind of continues. And I don't know, I hope to share some more things with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you're going to see, as we move forward, how important not only identity is, and not only that personal vision, and wherever you go on your journey through creativity to your life, there's some part of you that never escapes, that never, thank goodness, it doesn't escape, and stays with your work, no matter what turn it takes. And Accra is no exception to that. I've known him for a long time. We reconnected recently. And I'm very happy to have him also as a new member of this faculty. He's been in this field more years than he looks like. And he's a New York-based artist. He's born and raised down the block, too far, down in what is now NoHo?
No, it's still the Lower East Side.
Well, Lower East Side, NoHo. It's all mixing up. And he's a photographer and writer. And I did not know about your writing history until recently. His images have been exhibited worldwide in the major collections, the Museum of Modern Art, Victoria and Albert, and many other important institutions. His writings have appeared in the New York Times, good journal, and the New York Review of Books, which is my favorite journal, and which is a very prestigious place, as well as the Times to be a critic and writer. He's done his own books. The artist books, Atlas, is in the collection of the Whitney Museum and the New York Public Library. His book, Windbook, is also in the National Library of Luxembourg. These are unique pieces. The installation his installation was explores ethnicity and national identity. It was a year-long project where the book was outside, exposed the elements with only the winds to turn its pages. Very interesting, and I assume you documented every moment, stood there for months at hand, watching it deteriorate.
I got taken out.
And he is currently working on a photo-based project called the COVID Journals, something that we've all been through. And hopefully we're getting through it and done with it. So with no further ado.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Charlie, for the generous introduction. Let's see here. I want to sit down or stand up. I guess I'm going to stand up. No, it's just that can't make it taller. Okay. Let's see, left-hand side. Yeah, I want to do this. Yeah, good. I've got it in presenter. Good. That's what I was hoping to get. Okay, so my name is Accra, and today I'm going to show you images from the COVID journals. So I'm going to take you back to March of 2020, and there were reports worldwide of some virus that we all had to be careful of, and we didn't know how to be careful of it, just that we were supposed to be. And then I believe it was St. Patrick's Day here in New York City, or the day after St. Patrick's Day, the 17th, the 18th of March. The word came down that we were just all going to stay home, pretty much everyone. And so every artist that I know was asking themselves, well, what am I supposed to be doing? Because every artist that I know understood that artists speak to the larger culture, speak to the moment that's happening, that's unfolding. And this moment was clearly important, but there wasn't really much precedent about how you might respond. So I was sitting on my hands at my home. And then it occurred to me, oh yeah, I'm a photographer. And the thing that I was concerned about was, well, if I were to make pictures of this, like, what do I do? And then I realized, well, I've got a dark room and it's full of materials. I don't need to go to any store. I don't need the words of Humphrey Bogart in the Sierra Madre. I didn't need any stinking, digital technology, because I didn't know whether any of that stuff was going to be available long term. I was kind of anticipating in my mind supply chain issues. because I thought all of this is dependent on a global system that seems kind of imperiled now. So anyway, I knew I needed a large negative. I knew I needed a negative that was portable. I knew I needed something that was black and white because I didn't want to be dealing with technology. So I had lots of Tri-X already. It was 120. I have a 6x6 camera. And I walked 7 blocks to the hospital near me, Elmhurst Hospital, which is the hospital that was the first to fill up in New York City, in the city that was the first to kind of crumble almost in front of COVID. So as we like to say in Jackson Heights and Queens, we were the epicenter of the epicenter. And so this first image is Gail from the ICU. This is Nurse Omar. No, this is Nurse Angel. This is Gail. And this is a local family out for a family outing. Everything had changed. And my first thought was, I'm supposed to be seeing this. This needs to be seen. And it was not supposed to be global in any sense. I couldn't be global. I wasn't traveling. No one was traveling. But I knew that what I could see from my own vantage point was of value, just as what you see from your own vantage point is of value. Because, there's something that historians talk about, micro-histories. And these became very popular in the late 80s and early 90s. Because when you were a child, undoubtedly, although you could still be said children, just being kids, perhaps, we have this sense, perhaps we're even told, that history is something that's written by important people about important people. But historians realized that there were narratives that had been left, kind of like little treasures here and there, that were written by, that were created by people who were not considered, quote unquote, important. But they became important because they talked about the lives as lived by the majority of the people in that moment. And that's what I thought I could contribute. I said, I can do that. And this is I'm forgetting her name. She is a teacher, and this is her with her daughter with the princess and the fish. EMTs, one in training and one the instructor. I knew that this moment that I call contagion was not going to last forever, but it was one that wasn't like we'd want to see it. Perhaps we might need to see it, but I knew that it was important to be recorded so that we might have it to look at when we needed to. The when part, I'm not sure of. And we're still not through this moment. So it's still relatively fresh. So our hindsight is not as clear as it might become. This is Nurse Billy. She had traveled from Texas to help out with the nurses at Elmhurst Hospital. They were working like 14 and 15-hour shifts, and they were working schedules that were 6 and 7 days a week. So there was massive burn. This is Jamal with his mother going out shopping. And so, so this idea of the COVID journals, it started off as singular, the COVID journal. And then someone I was working with mistakenly made it plural. And I realized, oh, he's right. Because after this moment of contagion, it kind of gave way to the hunger. Suddenly in New York City, because everyone was staying home, people weren't going to work. There were lots of people for whom work meant money that day. If you didn't work, you didn't get paid. And if you didn't get paid, you didn't eat. And so hunger became an issue. So here at a local restaurant near where I live, the restaurant had no patrons, and they had refrigerators full of food. they started cooking for people. They started cooking for essential workers. Here are pre-prepared meals being loaded for people working at a hospital in the Bronx. When the restaurant wasn't helping out with feeding essential workers, then people who lived in the neighborhood would come in and distribute donated food to soup kitchens. And what you call them? They were just emergency food banks, really. Here is a young man who's in front of another restaurant in a neighborhood nearby mine. And that day was onions and cabbages in giant 20 and 30 pound sacks being loaded onto vans, being taken all over the borough of Queens. The hunger portion of the COVID journals was really challenging because the recipients of the largesse, it was very tricky for me. Photographing people who are on a food line was no small thing, and I made a few images, but I don't show that many because it doesn't feel appropriate. I asked everyone's permission, but I kept thinking in my mind, well, if I were on a food line, I didn't mind being photographed, but I did mind. Would I say yes? Would I say no? These two gentlemen were on the senior citizen portion. And when they saw me with my camera, they immediately raised their hands, as you're seeing the photograph. I really don't know why, except they were from South Asia, and I presumed wherever they were from, this was an indication, this was a sign to indicate not just their agreement to be photographed, but their kind of a reification, a sign of their goodwill in being photographed. Not quite smiling like we might do in the US, but something similar. And that just was like went straight through my heart in that. And it's very funny, I'll tell you now, I haven't mentioned this before. I had an equipment failure the moment I was about to photograph them. The strobe that I was using, because I was using Fill Flash, went out. And I lived a few blocks away and I said, wait here. And I ran home and I got some other equipment and then I retook the picture, because I just had to get this image. And they were like, it wasn't the exact image, but they were right there. They were good with it. And it was just fantastic. Oh, by the way, if you have questions during, feel free to ask. So this is Matt, and some of the people I see again. So Matt is a part of an organization that organizes pushcart vendors. The pushcart vendors were feeding lots of people because, like the restaurants, they had food, no one to give it to, and the food was going to go bad. And so he was splitting his time, helping to work for these food banks and supporting the pushcart vendors. And he's still active out there because pushcart vendors, they're still having a rough time. Now, a funny thing happened during this pandemic. I wasn't really sure. I wasn't sure of myself. On Memorial Day of 2020, there was a murder in Minneapolis. And all of a sudden, everything seemed to stop. George Floyd was killed by a police officer. And it wasn't like the pandemic had been declared over in the United States, but it took everyone's breath away. It had come on the heels of Breonna Taylor, and then Ahmaud Arbery was on the heels of Breonna Taylor. Although Ahmaud Arbery, to be honest, he'd been murdered months before, but part of the tragedy was we only learned in April, just a month before George Floyd. It was too much. And as people took to the streets, I was sitting at home thinking, oh my gosh, the world is finding a new center in wasn't exactly comfortable, but I suppose it was a way that it needed to sort itself out because things were certainly imbalanced. And it took me about a week to realize, oh yeah, I guess this is part of the pandemic too. It hadn't occurred to me because it came in a form that I wasn't really prepared to see in that moment. It took me about a week. I felt really stupid. I guess the same kind of stupid I felt like when I realized that I was supposed to be photographing the pandemic, forgetting for a good solid 2 weeks that I was a photographer. And I say that not at all to be self-deprecating. I say that almost as a reminder to all of you. Sometimes the thing that is necessary, the thing that is most pressing for us to pay attention to is right in front of us. And there'll be moments when you feel that you're very late to the party, when you realize what that thing is, but you're never late to the party. You always get there when you do get there. And it was the same in this case. So it took me a week. It wasn't like that ship had sailed. There were still ideas that needed expressing visually. What struck me most forcefully during this moment, in the spring and the summer and part of the fall of 2020, was how unified people were in their rejection of state violence. For the first time in my life, I'm 59, white people were talking about white privilege. I was like, oh, that's new. I hadn't quite heard that before. For those who aren't from New York, for those who aren't from the US, there has been talk among people of color here in the US about how all the serious hard work in race relations that could possibly be done by people of color has been done. There's still stuff that other people of color might do, but the rest of the work, the rest of the real work, that's for the people who are not of color to consider now. In that moment, after May 25th of 2020, those other parties started considering their responsibilities. It's like, yeah, let's see where that goes. And I didn't think of that in some kind of snarky way. I was really curious. I wanted that to go someplace, and we are actually living through that very moment now, seeing where that takes us. So I looked at this man. I thought of him as kind of an aging hipster. But he was really sincere. And he laid it all there on the sign. I'm not a big one for signs. I do have a few signs here and there, but I don't feel that text is necessary to complete an image when you have a figure there who's ready to explain themselves with their own gaze. And it's funny, I was talking with another artist at a certain point. They were not asking, they were lamenting the masks that we all wear now? How is it possible to see a person? It's funny. I talk to my class, I talk to people all the time about how much I personally dislike masks. I mean, I wear them, of course, about making things safe as possible. But in terms of knowing a person, it becomes so very difficult. But when I was making these images, when I do make these images, I don't even think about that because the place where I meet these people is so, I want to say charged, but I know it's not charged in the way that, war or something like this. It's not charged like that, but people come to me with purpose. And in that purpose, I can photograph them with their mask and know them and share them. In one case here, this young woman was wearing sunglasses and a mask, and it wasn't a rule of mine not to photograph someone with sunglasses, but if they're fully covered, I was like, well, who is there to see? Who is home? But something told me otherwise with this young woman. And so often in photography, because it's a kind of sustained seeing that we do, I responded intuitively in the moment to something that I could articulate clearly after the fact, because she had that fantastic Afro pick with the fist coming out of her hair. And she had all the buttons and the flag and everything just was right. And for those of you who are unaware, and I think most of you cannot be aware because again, you're too young. It used to be that the equivalent of Dwayne Reed and Walgreens would sell Afro picks in a variety of shapes and colors. My own Afro pick was red, green, and black with foldable handles. The pick being black and the handles being red and green because those were the colors of African nationalism. And though I didn't leave my pick stuck in my head, that was a common thing to do. It was a look. And it came back, it has come back, I suppose. But it's something that made me smile, something that made me reflect. It made me think about 2020 in terms of the 60s. And in speaking with people who were much older than me, because I was 6 years old in '68. So I saw it from the perspective of a small child. But from people who are adults or young adults, this moment now that we're living through, the level of chaos, the level of uncertainty far surpasses anything that happened in those decades, in those years. So if anyone here has ever thought, darn, I missed it, no, you haven't. This is from the protest at City Hall to defund the police. It's towards the end of that protest. There are a few images I'm skipping. I'm showing a couple of images that are in my new book that's coming out next spring. But again, for similar to Sarah, for contractual reasons, it's important not to share the images that haven't really been shown so much yet. Occasionally, I'll meet other artists. This woman, her name is Claudine Antlers. She's an established painter. She's not in my circles, but I was on a residency and her name came up with another artist. And I figured, oh, she's a person. And she had come to Union Square to that protest with a double-sided portrait with Breonna on one side and George Floyd on the other. And I so loved the patterning of her dress, the flowers that she put in Breonna's portrait, tattoos on her arm, and the flowers on her mask, and the way she was lit up in the sun with the trees. And so when I'm making these images, I'm responding to the people, to what I see, And I'm trying to let them be themselves. I'm trying to step out of the way and give them space to be present. It's a funny thing when you're photographing other people in these kind of situations. They're not there to interact with you. So this was Borough Hall. I think Jumani Williams was speaking. It was in support of George Floyd. There was going to be a march across the Brooklyn Bridge shortly after that. And I'm there saying, can I take your picture? Please look in the lens. It's like, it doesn't seem so complicated, but in the moment, they're there thinking about their undeserved white privilege. They're there thinking about George Floyd. They're there trying to figure out what comes next. And I'm saying, please look in the camera. It's a real disconnect. But if I can have them do that for just a moment, then those concerns can be shared with you, with other people, photographically. And it's really simple and really hard. And I say that again, not as a way of talking about my experience, but sharing with you the idea of how simple it is, challenging at the same time, to make that thing real photographically. Yeah, I was not a fan of the whole Nike Just Do It, but I thought it's kind of good here. And if I loved the variety of masks that people brought out. Irony of the I can't read on the masks that we can't read. It's fascinating as I look at these again and I see them in a way, I see them differently, slightly differently each time I look at them. And I love the presence that this drummer brings in the portrait. The vulnerability. I was a little scandalized as a parent. It's like, do your parents know you're wearing so little in the band today? But that's part of the beauty of what she brings to the photograph. I say that kind of joke, yes. But she's present, she's there. And she wants to, this is a, excuse me, a protest that marks the 150th day without an arrest in the case of Breonna Taylor. And for those of you who have not kept up with that, there's nothing really new. There was no one ever arrested for her murder. There was a police officer who was disciplined for firing into someone else's apartment, and that was it. She was entirely, it was entirely legal to murder her in her bed. Part of the problem that led to that ridiculous scenario is that the Black district attorney, this is a document, the Black district attorney in Kentucky is a protege of Mitch McConnell, who is here. I don't know. I mean, he's really slipped into Old South mode the past few decades, and it just goes to show you that racism is something that doesn't just affect white people or people of privilege. It's as I like to say, it's an equal opportunity offender. It damages everything it touches. And so this district attorney is severely damaged. and spreads more damage with these ill-considered decisions. I love this guy. His gaze was so intense and he was so painfully. But he was really earnest and he was very present. And this doesn't often happen, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, because of course the sign behind her says, not all superheroes wear capes. And you know, the kind of reference that that makes. It is cute, it is fun. And the idea that people who stand up to be seen, people who stand up so their collective voice can be heard, in the moment, do act heroically. I don't know if any of you have participated in a public action, but you feel incredibly visible in a very vulnerable kind of way. You are on display like a product, like an actor. You're just visible and people are looking at you, paying attention to you. And it's something that not everyone is prepared for. And when I asked her if she could make I could take a photograph, she was like horrified, which is partly why she's giving me the sideways glance. But if anyone ever gets nervous with you, just have to be honest. You have to tell them why you want to take their picture. She asked her, I said, you look amazing. Your hair is fantastic. Please. Said yes. It's so funny when this person contacted me, it was without the mask and I recognized them. I have no idea who you are. I think the hair was hidden back because the hair was away. I do get to know some of the people I photograph. 10 years ago, I photographed the Occupy Wall Street protest for about a year. And that's the lion's share. But it's not a prerequisite. It's just part of the process of being present, of trying to pay attention. And I should say, because I'm not showing any other work this evening, I don't consider myself a social documentarian. It is a part of my practice. I can't say that it is. It most definitely is. But for most of my professional life, I've been known as an experimental photographer, working with experimental techniques, some of which I invent myself. And the reason I found myself here photographing, again at Brooklyn Borough, all in the case of this photograph, or in the case of Occupy Wall Street, all over the city as well, was because I was responding to this moment that came out of nowhere, caught me, blindsided me, caught me by surprise. And I knew that unless I looked at it, so, you know, we work with cameras. Where's my phone? My phone's over there, so I don't have. What we see is, I like to think of as the official version of culture. when a sculptor or a painter, installation artist working with media, when we look at something, when a sound artist makes a sound installation, we're talking about the world that we live in, the world that we feel, that we experience. And that's what people 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, that's what they'll know about 2020 and 2021 and 2022. We don't know what things will be most resonant for those people in the future. We don't know what will survive and in what form. But we participate in the creation of that record. You do. We all do. That's pretty exciting, I think. Your friends who work those fancy finance jobs and those fancy consultant jobs, they don't participate in that. They make money, yeah, but their ledgers, their reports, no one's going to look at those. No one is going to care about that. They only care about that in the moment because, you know, Jeff Bezos needs to sell, I don't know, more widgets or something like that. What people really care about is what you're making, what you are making. This was again at the defund the police protest. It felt so ironic. This young woman, a police officer wearing her body cam. She was really pleased to have her picture taken. The police give me all different kinds of responses when they ask to take a picture. There's one officer who's in the book I didn't show you. He thought for a moment, but he was like ready for his moment. He was good. And that'll happen. And sometimes he'll pretend not to hear you, but still look good. So vanity exists even in the NYPD. But she was really, she seemed pleased, and I was so confused by that. And I wondered as a Latina how she felt about this protest. And I knew it couldn't be easy being a Latina on the NYPD. That had to be a whole story in and of itself. So maybe that's why she was pleased, because she got to represent. She got to show a different face of an organization that's often justifiably considered violent and weird hard. Just trying not to be graphic about it. Love these guys. They came with the craziest masks. I actually own a version of this mask. This is called a respirator, and you can swap the cartridges out. So I have an organic vapor respirator from my days studying conservation of art. It's how you learn how to fix broken art. That's and so it helps you, like if you're an auto body painter and you're working with, you know, methyl ethyl ketone or methyl chloride, which are common solvents, so you don't die of liver cancer and crap like that. It'll help also with pandemics too. Unfortunately, when you breathe out all your germy air. So I was told I couldn't use my respirator as a mask. But these guys came looking like they were ready for, you know, germ warfare. It was fantastic. And I loved this, you know, hug, this gesture, you know, of closeness. Even as their faces almost became non-human because it was like bug-like with these cartridges sticking out of their faces. So this protest gave way to an election. So we went from contagion to hunger to justice, and justice took a sideways detour into democracy. And this is in my neighborhood on election day, and I traveled to a few different neighborhoods on election day. It was a busy day, photographing people who had voted, photographing people who were about to vote. This man's name, when I asked him, he said his name was King George. And I think he was absolutely serious. He was named King George, because that's something that happens in the African community, where You know, you can be named Queen or you can be named Prince, as Prince was actually named Prince. That was his given name. So I had no doubt this man was King George, and I loved the fact that King George was voting in an election in Harlem that day, giving me an incredibly beatific smile. That's a very serious case. He was handing out literature to people on the way. Oh, today is election day. I forgot. Charlie, you mentioned that. Yes, I have my sticker in my coat pocket. It was very exciting. I actually got interviewed by a graduate student from CUNY in the journalism program on the way out of the polls. Like, and I was on my way to come teach here, so it was like this room of mirrors, self-reflecting. It was very strange. And she took my photograph as part of the project.
She knew who you were.
No, she might find out. I don't know. In any event, election day gave way to what I call decision day, because the decision in the vote, of course, was delayed by 2 weeks, the first time ever. Well, not ever. There was the election of 1980, Bush v. Gore. That took a while to decide, but this was entirely different. The votes, we weren't sure which votes were which in many, many states. It wasn't a few hanging chads in Florida. And so that afternoon, again, I realized, oh my gosh, I should be out there photographing. And it was almost dark when I got to Times Square, but I figured there would be people there, and there certainly were. And they were very, very happy. People from all over the world. These were a pair of construction workers. I almost wished I'd done the project with color film, because the white guy on the left, on your left, his beard is like bright red along with his hair. He's like, you know, he's totally ginger. And the color combo, it was astounding. But he does a good impersonation of a young ZZ Top member still. And a group of trans women. And they told me something really fascinating. They told me that there were many in the trans community, or at least sufficient numbers, that were siding with Trump in that election. It just kind of, it was difficult to process. I mean, I do know of Caitlyn Jenner, but that seemed to be a real outlier, but evidently not so much. And I was so glad that, you know, they could be present. She was a very sweet granny with a funny side. I love this image of this woman waving the flag. The scarification on her face, I forget which people in Nigeria that could be Igbo. I can't say for sure, I'd have to look it up. But I think she's clearly an American citizen now. I was very, very happy. So I took a break. There was an election, stuff happened. And then we got a vaccine. So that's where I am now. Got what? There's just 3 more images, and I'm working with a clinic in Brooklyn, photographing people, talking about this moment that we're in, this transitional moment, wondering if it's going to last, the vaccine will last, whether we can take our masks off. What that means. And once again, I'm trying to see, what does it look like? Who are the people? And this is, without a doubt, the most challenging part of the COVID journals that I'm doing, because I'm working with another organization. It's not just me going to talk to people. I'm working with a clinic in Bushwick, and they are phenomenal. They are so wonderful. They are so excited to work with me. But they've got a job to do, and they're busy. So I can't get in all the times that I'm free. Some of the times I'm free, they're not free. And so I get in there when I can. And when I go to photograph at the clinic, just because they invited me to be there doesn't mean that the people who I'm photographing have to give me permission. I still have to ask their permission. And their shirts are rolled up, their sleeves are rolled up. They're incredibly vulnerable. And maybe they didn't come thinking they were going to be photographed. And yet they still say yes, mostly. I am so touched. This was, there's one more photograph after this, but this was the last frame this day of photograph. I only had one frame left. I was like, damn, she closed her eyes. And I was like, when I saw, I was like, damn, she closed her eyes. It's like, yeah, you go. Because there's so much focus and concentration in the way she presents to the lens. It's just so beautiful. So yeah, so I'm hoping to get a few more images that talk about this moment. And it's funny because once again, I feel really late to the party. And it's just such a terrible feeling when I know in my head, sadly, probably not so much, because it looks like this whole vaccination effort is going to take a little bit longer than we all thought. But perhaps shorter than some of the more pessimistic people are projecting. Thank you very much. That's what I have.
We have turn them off.
Oh.
We have a little time for some questions. Two people. Working with other people.
Should we take our masks off for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just stay back.
Like this.
Sarra, I see that you kind of progressed from photography to edit doing like creative direction and editing. I'm just kind of curious to see like when you kind of came to that realization and what that workflow and process was like. Did it start at SVA? Was it happening prior?
Hi, Idris. Idris is one of my students. So yeah, the question was, how did I guess, get into the moving image and more into, is it more about the medium or is it more about the commercial aspect of it?
The medium itself.
Okay. The medium itself was really at SVA. I didn't know, I didn't have access. I mean, we're talking many years ago now, I mean, almost 20 something years ago. And so at that time, access to video was limited, you know, and even if you did shoot, to edit it to in a way that you wanted to was limited. So I didn't know before I came to SVA that that's where I wanted to go to. I was working at the time as a photo editor. I graduated undergrad and I worked for 2 years as a photo editor. And I just felt like I needed to do something more with the image. And I looked all over the country, and this program was great because at the time it was the only program that allowed me to explore that. I didn't have a film background or film where I had more of a studio art background really. And so having a photography, but also wanting to go further, this was the best place for it. And when I remember I talked to Charles and he was very encouraging about, at the time, it was kind of a new cutting edge thing to allow photographers to also play with the moving image. I mean, we didn't even have the first video I showed, which was with the projections. That was on a 3-inch reel. It was like a tape to tape machine that I edited on. 96.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I in my memory, those 3/4 inch decks were gone by 96, but I guess not.
No, even professionally, I mean, that didn't happen until, I mean, Final Cut, and it was all Avid. Final Cut came in like 2000. So,
Yeah.
to your answer, I guess, or to answer your question, it was at SVA that I was able to make that leap. And it was something I knew I wanted. I just didn't know where else to get access. And then when I did here, I just jumped. I mean, I don't think I even really, I showed my collages and stuff, the first critique. And then soon after, I signed up for any kind of video class, and then just started doing that. Because I just knew that I wanted to play with, it was really more about playing with light and sound and adding layers to it in a way that I couldn't do without video. And it was tough. I mean, I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know, learn the camera or anything, but you just experiment. I mean, the video that I did was the blue one with the projections was in the back, one of the studios. This place in the back was cut up into a few studios or a few rooms. And then the other one, the red piece, I did that on a table in one of the rooms with a red cloth and a little lamp. And I beat onto like it was bare minimum crazy, just get it done kind of environment. But, I was naked in a room and people were trying to be like, no, I'm shooting in here, so it was, I just did what I wanted to because I was driven by what I've kind of had a vision in my head that I wanted to get out. And then I realized after, it wasn't until a fellow student, Sandra Dillon, later on told me after I graduated and I was looking for work and I was doing other things, that she was like, oh, there's this whole post-production commercial world you can get into. And I was just like, oh, I mean, again, I don't come from a country or people that were doing any of this kind of work. So I didn't even think about advertising or the commercial aspect until a friend was like, oh, do you want to do like commercial work and this and that? And I was like, oh, okay, I can make money off of this. Yeah, let's do it. And I started as an assistant and had to work many years to become an editor. So
That was a good question.
yeah.
And I love the response.
Oh, thanks.
I thought something else. Yeah. You need a microphone.
I have a quick question for Accra. First off, it was great to see your work. I feel like we've been in class talking so much about my own work. I get tired of it. So I was so glad to see your stuff after I've heard about it a lot. But yeah, I just in regards to the fact that portraits was kind of like the way in which you, it seemed as though you decided to approach the subject matter. And there's so much restraint in that when there's so many different options of ways in which you could have documented that process. I guess I'd just be curious to comment on that. It seemed like an obvious choice, but one that was just due to the gravity of the situation that you were entering yourself into, or I'll let you comment on that.
Yeah, I love that question, Will. That's really great. Yeah, choice, the question of what we have available to us as artists. Oh, okay, I can be closer, sorry. It's huge. There's this thing where people sometimes are casting about for new ideas and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I have nothing. It's like, that whole version of writer's block that people in other disciplines can experience. And when I'm thinking about making work, I know that I have this world of a universe, a multiverse of possible options. I mean, my brain is a little bit perverse in that I'll challenge myself to think of the most random combination and possibilities. It's like Hieronymus Bosch on acid inside my brain. And part of the game is that I know that at the end of the day, of the 1,000,003 choices that I have in front of me, only 4 really resonate with me. And of those 4, possibly 1 or 2 are available. And then it's set. I don't really have that choice. I mean, it does exist. It's there. I could make it happen, but I'd have to fight against what was needed. So when I'm looking at something like this pandemic, and I'm thinking, how should I see it? Not how Sarah should see it, because if she were to do that, it would be a whole different set of circumstances and it would necessarily look different. But how should I see it? And well, I have this Rolleiflex. It's a twin lens reflex. I knew it was that camera instantly. And I love Tri-X. I knew it was that instantly. I had all that in my darkroom. I had paper to print to give people who I was photographing. And it was all set. So there was thought, but the thought came very quickly. Perhaps that was because I've been doing this for so long that I knew. But as I've done other projects, you know, I know it has to be in color. I know it has to be this or that or the other thing. If there's uncertainty, for instance, there was uncertainty when I was working with the clinic in Bushwick about how I should photograph people. Oh my gosh. So I've made maybe 20, 25 rolls of film, and there's like 5 rolls of film that I like. And that's not a very good percentage for me. And I realized part of what it was I wasn't used to working with this other organization. I wasn't used to this other layer kind of just out of eyesight, but constantly present. And then when I realized what was necessary, I was like, oh, of course, how could I forget? It was very similar to how I was working before, but I had to make those circumstances happen, and it was less organic, but not impossible. And yet again, I felt late to the party, like I should have known beforehand. But it wasn't late. Maybe I had to go through that process to remind myself. But yeah, the level of choice is stupefying. Should the text be in Serbo-Croatian? Should we write with crayons? Or should we use day-glow colors? You know, you were experimenting with fire. Should it be underwater so that it dissolves? It kind of points to what John Cage was talking about with the level of possibility that exists in the world. But whereas he was very much about talking about that infinite variety and how it was all available and all useful and meaningful, I'm very much about how it touches us and permits us to speak to other people more clearly. So maybe a smaller vision than Cage.
I have a question for you, actually. How did you choose, or who do you stop, or why do you stop the people you do?
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Oh, sorry, I had a question for Accra. I said, he seems very careful in the way that you photograph or present them. I don't know how careful. He could be a madman. I have no idea. But how do you choose, or how do you choose who to stop or who to photograph?
It's tricky. It's very intuitive. I have a couple of things in my head. I know to avoid the people who did not receive enough love as children and who are just dying to have attention paid to them. Oh my gosh, there are a lot of them who live in New York City. I imagine worldwide they're represented. And aside from those people, I'm looking for the people who feel like they can be most honest. I think I was talking, not with this class today, but another class, about a Yoko Ono installation that the Modern did for a retrospective of hers. It was, they had taken one of her instructional pieces from her book Grapefruit, which if you don't know it, please look and see. It's a brilliant book. It's available. You can buy it now, printed matter. It's a great book. It's there's a history of instructional pieces. I forget, there was an Austrian who first pioneered it a few years before Yoko Ono did. She's one of the many people from Fluxus who were doing that. And in it, the piece, you're supposed to like scream to the wind. She says it very poetically and very epigrammatically. And so the Modern had set up this microphone, and it was in their new atrium, and people would go up and they would go, eek. It was like, what? It was like they were so aware of performing. They were so aware of being vulnerable, of being present. And every fiber of their being said no. And so they gave this stunted shadow of a scream to the wind. And I thought, oh, no, you need like an opera singer who's going to let it out. So the visual version of that is kind of what I'm interested in. I'm interested in people who aren't going to hold back and are going to give themselves. And it's hard to know. So I'm scanning the crowd. And as I'm scanning the crowd, because I'm so tall and I have this strange camera with me, some of them are looking back at me and see me photographing and wondering, is he going to choose me? I can see it in their face. And then it gets really complicated. It's like, I'd like to choose all of you, but there's not enough film. There's not enough time. And so I just try to make sure that they understand that I just want them. And it's really fast. I only, with this project here, I think I'm making 2 frames, maybe 3 frames of each of the people. That's it. With the vaccine, it's a few more because they're seated for so long getting the vaccine. When you get the vaccine, you've had it, you know, they give you this spiel about what to expect with the symptoms afterwards, how you can treat them, you know, getting all your documentation in order. So that process takes a good 7 or 8 minutes. And then there's the vaccination. And so normally the whole process is like 3 minutes from beginning to end. So I take a few more with the vaccine, but I need it personally because I'm not as practiced in that scenario. But it's funny. I have to rely. I mean, I imagine you do the same thing in your work when you're working with those children and that beautiful brown crayon piece. It's like, how do you direct a child?
Oh, is that the question?
I mean, it's like, yeah.
I didn't know if it was rhetorical. Children are interesting. Children are actually kind of more what you're saying. They show their emotion more. So you're trying to guide it more than get it out. And then you have to appreciate and revere it because they will tell you to your face when they're not ready. So you can't push them the way you might an adult, or you kind of have to just, the best way I could say is really guide it. Like you have to see when they're ready, what they have in them, what's available. And then and also depends the type of children, because I've also just recently done stuff for Ralph Lauren for their social campaign, social media. And those kids who've been modeling since they were like months old are amazing. Like they will literally be like, oh, I just want to go home. And then the camera, and I say shoot or action, and they're just like, and I'm like, oh my God, like they're actually in some ways more adjusted than adults. So it really depends on, the one I shot was just friends and family and some of my nephews. And we tried to keep it kind of.
So Ralph Lauren is going brown.
Well, no, this was not Ralph Lauren.
No, I know.
Oh, but yes.
Yes. No,
I
because,
see what you mean.
because
Yeah,
I'm thinking polo, and that doesn't sound like you're talking polo.
No, it is. It's polo.
But brown polo.
I guess. There were a few of us on set, yes. But it's a beautiful thing in that, it's really depends on who, like you said, who you're dealing with and their background and what you can tell. I love people. I love meeting people. So it's kind of just reading the same thing, kind of reading people and figuring out like, okay, what's the best way I can help you feel comfortable so you can do what you do best.
Exactly.
Any other questions? I'm pretty late. Like some of you are hungry.
Oh dear.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can get the mic, Harry.
I did, but I'll talk to
Hi, Sarah.
Hi,
Yeah,
Harry.
I like your photos and the videos, and it let me miss my parents and miss my home. And I have a question about how you balance the relationship between art and business.
You know, Harry's in my class and he does this to me at the end of every class. He asks me the most profound questions right at the end. Okay. So how do I balance the relationship between art and business, or is that what the question was?
Yeah.
There's different aspects to that. So I'm going to just choose one and answer one of those. I think timing is a big thing. It's timing in your career and what it is that you get to do. And I say timing because it depends. I mean, if you make that decision to live off of your work, now you don't have to, but if you make that decision, then you have to live. And you then have to play by certain rules. My choice to make it was because I wanted to get better. I wanted access to the equipment. At that point, editing, you couldn't own your own editing equipment. It was an Avid, it was a hardware and software thing. And some of the other competitors like Media 100 were very early on. You couldn't really afford them. And I had to start, I mean, I had an MFA, but I started as an assistant with people who were still in school, 7, 8 years younger than me. But it's an apprenticeship editing, at least it was. And so I decided to make that decision because I wanted to get better at what I did. And so you accept all the crap that comes with it, the hierarchy, egos, the crazy, the politics, and because you want to live. And at some point you decide when to break off and do your own thing, or you decide to push yourself to the point where you can make your own decisions. And I stuck in it long enough that I became an editor and then eventually quit my full time. I was there for 7 or 8 years. And then I went freelance. I had my own connections. And then I got to a point where I can choose the kind of work that I did, right? Because at one point when you're doing commercial work, you have a reel, you have your, and you're as good as your last project, or you have to keep going and you have to keep showing and like what's current, what's new, and why people should choose you. It's a constant kind of interview, if you will, but it's all about your work. No one really even talks to you sometimes. It's just you show your work and it's about people that know you. So it takes a while to get to a place where you can actually choose to do the work you want to do if you take the traditional route. So for me, I did it that way, which is I went in, I learned because I needed to understand the system. It's a very different world, right? When you're working with people, and especially the work I was doing, editing, which is helping other people kind of meet their vision. I was the last in the pipeline. So I had to do a lot of kind of work with everyone else. And so that took time for me to just understand, and more about it took time to understand actually the room and the players more so than the equipment. It takes a lot of time to understand the, I guess, the fabric and the people that you're working around. And so that's how I did it. But nowadays, I think there's, the fact that people produce their own content, the fact that you don't, when I was coming up, there's only certain channels that you can use. There's only certain equipment and access. Now it's more open. And so you can kind of dictate your own path in some ways about the kind of work you want to do. I think it's also, I'm going to wrap it up because I know Charlie's getting, but there's also lots of ways that you could, use your artistic background. I think right now specifically is a time where media and commercialism and art and all of that is kind of melding. And so a lot of commercial companies are looking for kind of up and coming new ideas, and a lot of fashion houses, a lot of movies, movies still the one that's harder to get into, but there's still independent routes. So I think in terms of back to your main question, how do you reconcile it? Each person does their own. For me, I needed to get to a position where I can do what I needed to do, what I want to do. And that meant putting my head down for a number of years and eating crap, basically, and doing what I had to do to get there. And then now I'm in a better place where I can kind of choose the things I want to do.
All right, thank you.
Oh, thank you.